Good morning to all the participants joining from Sri Lanka and good afternoon to all the panelists joining from Hong Kong. Welcome to the webinar on business and investment opportunities for Sri Lanka in Hong Kong and beyond. Just let me take you through the house rules. Uh, Kindly keep your mics muted and the video switched off. And during the Q&A session, kindly post your questions on the chat box. And now I would like to invite the moderator, Mr. Shiran Fernando, Chief Economist of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, to take this session forward. Over to you, Shiran.
Thank you, Diniti. Warm welcome to everyone, and good morning and good afternoon to all those joining in to today's webinar. And I think we'll have a very insightful 1 hour ahead to learn more about Hong Kong, some of the investment opportunities that you may not have known before. Of course, the two countries share a very strong relationship, a trade and investment relationship, but how can we improve it further? And I think that's the discussion that we will have today. To kick things off, let me now invite Mr. Manjula De Silva, who is the CEO and Secretary General of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, to provide the welcome address.
Good morning to you and good afternoon to those joining from Hong Kong. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, you're clear, Manjula.
Okay, warm welcome to everybody for this webinar on business and investment opportunities for Sri Lanka in Hong Kong and beyond, which is organized by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce in association with Invest Hong Kong. So this webinar is a little bit different to most of the webinars that we have been holding in the recent past, where we have either focused on trade promotion between two countries or investment into Sri Lanka. More inward investment to Sri Lanka has been the focus of some of these programs. Now today, this is a little different in the sense we are looking at investment opportunities outwards, and in particular in Hong Kong and beyond. Why we have thought of having a webinar of this nature at this point in time is because we feel that many Sri Lankan companies have today reached a stage of maturity which enables them to look at investment opportunities beyond Sri Lanka to expand their business beyond the boundaries of Sri Lanka. In fact, as we know, there are many who have a vision of becoming global or regional companies, and some have already made significant investments outside of Sri Lanka. Just to give a few examples, we know of significant investments that have been made by the apparel sector in India, in the US, and a few other countries. Financial services, which have expanded significantly into the South Asian region, in countries like Bangladesh, and even to the further east, into countries like Cambodia and Myanmar. We have heard of many success stories. And also energy companies which have gone into Africa in particular, who have again made successful inroads into some of those territories, and also IT sector companies which have also made significant investments overseas. Of course, at the present moment, as many of you are aware, there may be some limitations imposed by the current exchange controls, but that we see only as a temporary drawback, because this has come as a result of the current issues we are facing as a result of the COVID pandemic. But as the economies recover, as we come out of some of the present issues, we are hopeful that some of these restrictions will go away. In fact, the chamber has already started to lobby to get these lifted. We had a recent meeting with the Department of Foreign Exchange of the central bank, and we strongly believe that these restrictions will be lifted very soon. So I think as local companies, we need to start looking at opportunities overseas, because it does take quite a bit of time before we really get to the point of making the investments, and by that time, very likely that some of these restrictions, which are temporary limitations, will be taken out. So also at the same point, I would like to make a request from our partners, Invest Hong Kong, to support us on our virtual investment forum, which we are planning to have in May, 4th to 6th of May, where the Ceylon Chamber is going to partner the BOI and the Colombo Stock Exchange in hosting virtual investment forum, showcasing investment opportunities in Sri Lanka. So we would look forward to having your support to get investors to join that event as well. So before I conclude, I wish to thank in particular Stephen Phillips, Director General of Invest Hong Kong. Thank you very much for your support and partnership with this event. And also Ashish Mehta and Charlie Idikula from Invest Hong Kong, India, for their support. And from the chamber side, Shiran Fernando, our Chief Economist, for the contribution he will be making as a resource person at this program. And of course, Lilakshi and Diniti for making all the arrangements from our end. So thank you very much to all of you, and I look forward to a very interesting program. Over to you, Shiran.
Thanks, Manjula. So I think Manjula sort of set the stage for kind of the objectives and the purpose of this webinar to provide that required information. And thank you very much, Manjula, for those insights. So following his remarks, we will go into two addresses, two presentations, and after that, we will have the Q&A session towards the end. So while the speeches are going on, feel free to send in your comments into the chat box so that we can take it up during that Q&A session towards the end of the next 60 minutes or so. So now it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Stephen Phillips, who is the Director General of Invest Hong Kong. Stephen is presently the DG of the Investment Promotion at Invest Hong Kong, which is the government department responsible for attracting and facilitating FDI into Hong Kong. If I was just get a bit on his bio, he's had a career focused on Asia for more than 30 years. Phillips first moved to Hong Kong in 1989, holding senior investment banking positions with Deutsche and BSW Barclays Capital, before co-founding a Hong Kong-based group of companies providing IT, financial, and consultancy services across Asia. In 2004, he joined the UK's Department of International Trade before becoming Chief Executive of the China-Britain Business Council in 2006, as well as the Chairman of the EU-China Business Association. Phillips holds the BSc University of Exeter. Stephen?
I think probably finish here, and that the line's breaking up a little bit. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
I can hear you well.
Well, first of all, Shiran, Manjula, thank you so much, and to all of your colleagues at the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce for giving this opportunity to talk to your members. It really is a great pleasure. And definitely will support your virtual investment forum in May. So we'll follow up after that. But that sounds great. I've got a presentation that I'll take everybody through. And at the end of it, Charlie's going to tell you a little bit more about Invest Hong Kong. And then we'll be very happy to answer any questions that you have got. So what I'd like to cover is, first of all, why is Hong Kong such a great place for companies around the world to do business, give you a little bit of a feel for the vibrancy of the business environment in the city. I'll touch on the economic outlook. Obviously, everywhere has been battered by COVID. And then I'd like to talk to you about the opportunities that companies from Sri Lanka might find in this part of Asia. And the concentric circles on this slide, really, I'm trying to conjure up an image of a ever-increasing ring of circles with Hong Kong at the center. So if you keep that image in your mind, I'll come back to that in a little while. So let's take a look at why Hong Kong is such a vibrant international center. Well, firstly, there are lots of fundamentals about Hong Kong which make it attractive to companies from all around the world and indeed from mainland China. The first is we're very lucky to be geographically right at the very center of Asia. And for busy executive teams, in normal times, what that means is that they can fly to operations and clients all over Asia. Almost every major city within the region is within 4 hours flying of Hong Kong, and half the world's population within 5 hours flying of Hong Kong. We don't quite make Sri Lanka in the 5 hours, but not far off. But it does mean that the productivity and efficiency of having a team that covers the region in Hong Kong is very high indeed. The second fundamental reason is Hong Kong's very unique position as part of China. So, as I'm sure you all know, it's a special administrative region of China. And under this formula called one country, two systems, Hong Kong is part of China, but continues to operate a different legal, economic, government, political, and social structures. What we have underpinning this is a common law based system based upon English common law, which of course will be familiar to many of you as well. And that familiarity of the legal system to companies around the world is one of the reasons why Hong Kong is attractive. We also have an independent judiciary, with the final court of appeal in Hong Kong actually having international judges sitting on it as well. And this is one of the reasons that Hong Kong is such a great place to structure projects, have Hong Kong governing law, but also when things go wrong, to use Hong Kong as a dispute resolution centre. But crucially, by being part of China, Hong Kong also has the most preferential market access into the rest of the mainland. And I'll touch on that again a little bit later. We've got a very business-friendly government. The whole concept of the government here is very much a laissez-faire approach. And one manifestation of that is our competitive and simple tax system. Many people focus on the competitive rate of taxation. The first 2 million Hong Kong dollars of profits are just taxed at 8.25% and 16.5% above that. And 2 million Hong Kong is about $250,000 US. But I actually think the beauty of Hong Kong is really the simplicity of the tax system. We really only have corporation tax and personal income tax in terms of operating a business as the significant taxes. So we don't have the complicated taxes that tie your finance function up in knots, VAT or GST or sales tax, capital gains taxes, and so forth. So the ability to run a business here is really very straightforward. And as you can see from the charts here, Hong Kong compares favourably to other parts of Asia. So let's talk a little bit more about what that means in terms of the makeup of the international business community in Hong Kong. Many international and mainland companies call Hong Kong home. Each year at Invest Hong Kong, we do a survey of all of the companies. In 2020, we had 9,025 companies that the headquarters sit outside Hong Kong. And they really do come from all over the world. You can see a large portion of them, over 1,500, use Hong Kong for regional headquarters. So typically a holding company that has got multi-site operations. It could be in mainland China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, and so forth. And that goes to the geographical nature of Hong Kong and the ability to travel very easily. The top sectors within those investments: import and export trade, financing and banking, business and professional services, and logistics. But we are seeing the fastest growth in other sectors, in AI and robotics, in biotech, in fintech. So the economy is beginning to change shape, like many places, driven by technology. The companies tell us the reasons that they like Hong Kong: that simple and low tax regime, the geographical location, the high quality communication and transportation infrastructure that we've got. So that's the airport, it's our port, it's the road and rail links to mainland China. You can see the top sources of investment are probably some of the more mature economies in the world. I think it's quite notable that Singapore, a country that's only the same size as Hong Kong in terms of population, is actually our 5th source of investment. And very often companies ask me to compare Hong Kong with Singapore, and they both got good advantages. But I think the fact that Singapore, as that relatively small country, just over 7 million population, is our 5th source of investment, tells us something about how important Hong Kong is even to Singapore. For companies coming to Hong Kong and setting up a business entity here, there's a range of different government funding schemes and support at every step of the way. These vary by the nature of the business, normally mostly by the sector that the company is in. But there's a raft of funding schemes around setting up, a range of funding schemes, and indeed some tax incentives around R&D. There's a number of programs that support the hiring of high quality talent, and that can include some grant funding to subsidize them. There's a range of different funding mechanisms to help businesses grow, both in Hong Kong and outside Hong Kong. As you can see here, we've got a QR code which links you to all of the different schemes. I warn you, there are very, very many of them. And one of the things that we can do at Invest Hong Kong is help focus you on the ones that might be relevant to your business. Because normally out of 100 different schemes, maybe 8 of them might be relevant to a particular business. So easier to ask us than you go through everything to try and figure it out, in all honesty. Hong Kong, I know, has been in the headlines in international media over the last couple of years. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about the reality on the ground. You will have seen quite dramatic images from 2019 when we had the social unrest in the city. That has all subsided, and the city is operating normally, and there's no disruption because of social unrest. But like everywhere in the world, the economy has been hit hard by COVID, and undoubtedly that continues to affect every business operating in Hong Kong. The sectors most impacted are retail, tourism, food and drink, Other sectors such as financial and professional services, the biotech life sciences sector, the logistics sectors have actually done quite well. So a mixed picture, but COVID is the dominant issue. The economy obviously is challenging. What offsets the challenges in Hong Kong is inevitably China on our doorstep as the second largest economy in the world. The economy returning to growth fastest is the real engine that will ensure that Hong Kong picks up more quickly, and indeed the rest of the world does. Geopolitics is still there. You'll be aware of the trade tensions between the US and China. That has had some impact on Hong Kong, but comparatively to COVID, it isn't such a big deal. In terms of economic outlook, our financial secretary, our finance minister, gave his annual budget about 10 days ago. And the GDP projections for this year are growth in the range of 3.5% to 5.5%. And that really all depends upon COVID coming under control and travel restrictions being lifted, but returning to pretty robust growth as soon as that happens. I'd now like to turn to the opportunities. And as I tried to conjure up at the beginning of the session, I do see this as a series of ever-increasing circles of opportunity. Opportunities in Hong Kong itself, then opportunities in a region of southern China called the Greater Bay Area. And I'll go into that in a little bit of detail, because I think the Greater Bay Area is the most exciting economic development initiative on the planet, and I think it's significant. China, of course, is a very important market to many companies around the world, and I'll touch on some of the different angles that I see in China, which again can be accessed from Hong Kong. But Hong Kong isn't just about China. Hong Kong also has got very good links into the countries of ASEAN, and also the Belt and Road initiative also presents some opportunities to structure Belt and Road investments and finance Belt and Road investments in Hong Kong. So I'll touch on that. So in Hong Kong itself, obviously our home, the economy is similar to that of the mature economies of Western Europe or the US or Canada. It's mature in terms of the sophistication of the consumer and the demands of the consumer. It's also mature in terms of being a service-led economy rather than a manufacturing-led economy. And also a lot of those world-class international companies here demanding world-class products and services from the companies that they work with. At Invest Hong Kong, we cover every sector of the economy. And this slide shows all of the sectors where we've got dedicated teams that can help you identify the opportunities for your business. So we've got one broad team that really focuses on innovation. So that's very much in the tech space, startup and scale-ups. We've got a very vibrant startup ecosystem. And then really the logistics and advanced manufacturing sectors. Hong Kong, of course, is very well known as an international financial centre. So the second broad grouping is financial, fintech and professional services. And great opportunities exist there in Hong Kong and using Hong Kong for other parts of the region. But then we've also got a very vibrant lifestyle and creative sector. And for us, that's consumer products and sourcing, creative industries, tourism and hospitality, and wellness. So all of those opportunities in Hong Kong. This slide just covers off the headlines of a report that we did recently on sourcing, and Manjula mentioned some of the garment companies from Sri Lanka. This in particular might be very interesting, but Hong Kong is a fantastic global hub for sourcing, adding value at every step of the way. If this is of interest, we can take you through it in greater depth. But I appreciate this won't be fully relevant to everybody in the audience. I'd now like to talk about that Greater Bay Area. As I said, I think the biggest economic opportunity in the world. So GBA, as we call it, consists of the 2 special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau, and 9 other cities in Guangdong province. They're all roughly 1 hour's travelling from each other, so it's a very dense marketplace. 71 million people, a total GDP of 1.6 trillion US dollars. So simple message, it's big, it's accessible, and it's very accessible to serve the consumers. But this region is also home to some of the most innovative companies in China. Shenzhen, as you may know, is home to some of China's great tech companies. The Greater Bay Area is a national policy priority, working then with the 11 cities. It is about making it a world-class innovation and financial services cluster. I won't go into the detail here, but we do have more information on our website and a good series of short reads on LinkedIn. The cities here, just some economic data for those of you that like to look at data. I won't go into the detail, but what is important is this region accounts for 11% of the whole economy of China. So it's a great entry point if you're looking at entering the China marketplace. And because of the density, it's efficient to do so. So the scale of the economy, it would actually be about the 11th largest economy in the world in its own right today. If we look 10 years ahead, it could be the 5th or 6th largest economy. So it goes to this point about it being such a significant opportunity that I think every company would do very well, at least to take a serious look at what it might mean for your business. This is another bit of data comparing GBA to other Bay Areas in the world, Silicon Valley, New York, Tokyo Bay Area. And again, I think what you can pick up from this slide is the scale of GBA dwarfs really all of the other Bay Areas. And obviously that goes to scale of opportunity for you as a business. China, obviously, Hong Kong being part of it. As I said, we have preferential market access to the mainland under our own free trade agreement called CEPA. So a Hong Kong company will always get better market access than a company from any other part of the world. There are some very important clusters in China. We've covered off GBA, but in and around Shanghai, the Yangtze River Delta, very important. Central China, very important, in and around Wuhan. Chengdu, Chongqing in the west of China, fast developing. In Beijing, you've got a new cluster called JJJ, also very quickly developing. You've got more traditional economies up in the northeast, which really borders Mongolia, Russia, and North Korea. And then in the far northwest, access to the markets of Central Asia. So a very big landscape, and depending upon the nature of your business, bits of the country might be relevant to you. But we can help you identify what might be right for your business. I mentioned that Hong Kong isn't just about China, so tapping into the opportunities in ASEAN and Belt and Road is very important. And again, there's some technical trade investment measures to help you do that beyond the accessibility to the marketplace. So Hong Kong itself entered a free trade agreement with the economies of ASEAN. The terms are different for each member state of ASEAN, But again, for a Hong Kong company with Hong Kong source products or services, will get preferential access to those ASEAN economies. And of course, some of them very significant: Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, the Philippines. Others less developed. Manjula mentioned Myanmar, for instance, Laos, Cambodia. One of the latest mechanisms that has just been announced is so-called RCEP. It's the world's largest trading bloc, 15 countries as a member. Hong Kong is not a member in its own right yet, but has indicated that it will. But again, this is really about Asia Pacific. So it's a third of the world's GDP, third of the world's population, and so a very important trading and investment bloc with some technical support underpinning the reduction of barriers to market entry. So this will drive more trade and investment flows within the region. So last of all, the Belt and Road. I know that Sri Lanka has got a number of Belt and Road projects, notably in your port sector. But it is a very big landscape. It really is a global landscape. Why Hong Kong is relevant to this is that it's a very good location for an overseas company and a mainland Chinese company to set up a joint venture, structure the project, structure the business, do the financing, whether it's debt or equity, use the legal services, consulting services in Hong Kong, and sadly for those that go wrong, also use Hong Kong as a world-class arbitration or dispute resolution centre. So hopefully I've given you a very, very broad overview of the scale and breadth of opportunity. We'd be very happy to have a chat one-to-one with any of you who want to know what this means for your own business. Charlie will tell you in a moment or two a little bit more about how to go about that. But if I can ever help, my QR codes for LinkedIn and for WeChat are here. So scan them. We'll be sharing the presentation anyway. But we look forward to working with you, whether it's this week, next month, next year, or in 3 years' time. As Manjula said, investment takes a long time to come to fruition. You've got to plan properly, and we'll help you along the way. So thank you very much indeed. And Sharon, back to you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think that presentation really set out kind of the opportunity within Hong Kong. I think you painted the macro picture as well, and then kind of the specific areas, especially the Greater Bay Area, which I think you went to in depth. Maybe in our Q&A session, we can get into it. It's a little bit more. And to the participants, I'm sure you might have maybe follow-up questions or some area of interest you want to really get to know more from Stephen. So please do put your questions into the comments box, and I will pick it up as the program goes on. So let me now invite Charlie Idicola, who is the consultant Invest Hong Kong India team, to provide his remarks following Stephen. Charlie?
Thank you, Sharon. Just wanted to check whether you're able to see my screen.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay. Firstly, thank you so much, Stephen, for taking the time and explaining beautifully about the business opportunities in Hong Kong. A very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for taking the time and attending this session. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce you to our InvestHK India and Sri Lanka team. So myself and my colleague, Mr. Ashish Mehta, who's also in the panel, look after the InvestHK India team. And over the years, we've been helping many Indian companies to set up their business in Hong Kong. Sri Lanka has been included to our purview last year, and we are fortunate enough to interact with all of you. And we hope to provide you or offer you our services in the coming future.
We are also open to questions after the webinar, and we'll also be sharing our contact details. So moving forward, so this is something which DG has or Stephen has already covered regarding the sectors. So we look after all these sectors. Technology, ICT, consumer products, tourism, hospitality, and creative industries. So we do have sector specialist teams for each of these sectors, and interested companies from Sri Lanka, if you want to have any further discussions, we will be more than happy to introduce you to our teams in Hong Kong. So this is how InvestHK will help your company grow, starting with planning. We also help you with setup, launch, and expansion. I'll elaborate on our services in my next slide. So these are the services that we offer companies from India and Sri Lanka. Business support facilitation, which is customized based on your business requirements. We also advise on company incorporation, bank account opening, visa and immigration, office setup, recruitment, tax regulations, business cost models, licenses, etc. We also do introductions to important service providers and business contacts. For example, if you would need the services of an accountant or lawyer or a visa consultant or a property agent, we are more than happy to introduce you to these service providers, and also essential business contacts which will be beneficial for your business. We also help with PR and marketing support and offer you networking opportunities so that you get access to global buyers and business partners. We make sure that we provide regular updates and information about the government initiatives and programs, and we make sure that we provide you these insights on a regular basis. For companies who are looking to set up their business in Hong Kong and also to settle down in Hong Kong, we offer advice on housing, healthcare, education, social networking, etc. We also have an aftercare specialist team who helps existing businesses to diversify into other sectors and also manage their existing business. So how do you get more information about Hong Kong? Our Invest Hong Kong in Mumbai office in Mumbai will be the first point of contact for Sri Lankan companies. We can be contacted via email, phone, or WhatsApp for any information or queries. We are also planning to organize follow-up meetings in the end of March or the first week of April, specifically for Sri Lankan companies who are interested in Hong Kong. And again, we'll be using video conferencing platforms such as Zoom, Skype, or Microsoft Teams. Just for your information, in the month of February, we did our first webinar with the gems and jewelry sector. We had got a very good response as this session was attended by over 100 companies from the gems and jewelry sector in Sri Lanka. If you have missed attending this session, we'll ensure that we'll share the presentation as well as the live recording of the session. How do you get more information? You can definitely refer our website where you can get access to our brochures and also Invest Hong Kong newsletters, which are issued once in every quarter. We are also very active on social media, especially on LinkedIn. For regular updates, you can definitely visit our LinkedIn page and connect with us via LinkedIn. For the offer and fully funded by the government. So these are our worldwide network of offices spread across. We have 30 offices globally. And the reason why I wanted to mention this slide is if any of your friends, relatives, or business partners across the world are looking for Hong Kong expansion, you can feel free to refer them to us. We'll ensure that we connect them to the right representative office. Lastly, I would like to share our contact details. We mentioned our email address, our telephone number, our WhatsApp number. And again, we are very active on social media, so you can reach out to us via LinkedIn. And once the situation comes under control, the pandemic situation comes under control and travel restrictions are lifted, we wish to travel to Sri Lanka and meet you personally to understand your business requirements. And with this, I would like to thank all the speakers and the participants and Ceylon Chamber for taking the time and organizing this webinar. We look forward to having questions at the Q&A session and as well as after the webinar as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlie. I think good information that no doubt our participants would like to know more about. And as you were speaking, Charlie, we did get a few questions coming in through the chat box. So we'll get straight into the Q&A discussion. I don't know if Stephen had time to see some of the questions coming in, but let me read it out as well. There's someone who said in the presentation, Stephen, they saw import and wholesale and retail being the #1 major line of business. In order to introduce Sri Lankan brands to the Hong Kong market, what are some of the information platforms available to connect with importers, agents in Hong Kong? Stephen or Charlie, anyone?
Well, in terms of exporting to Hong Kong, we have a sister organisation called the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, which has got a wealth of information on that front. What Charlie can do is follow up with Dhananjaya with more information on that. The TBC services range from some very big events that they put on different consumer sectors, but they've also got a number of services that help companies find potential agents or distributors in Hong Kong and indeed in China. So that's the organisation that provides most of that work. When you get to the stage that you're looking to set up a physical presence in Hong Kong, then that's when Invest Hong Kong can help you. But what we do see in terms of brands, it goes from very niche food and drink brands through cosmetics, through wellness products, through different cultural and artistic stuff. So there's always an opportunity. What Hong Kong isn't great at is a mass market product, but something that is niche and has an appeal, that is either high quality or something that is very attractive because it appeals to a particular consumer subsector, then that would fit well with Hong Kong.
Thanks, Stephen. Charlie, do you want to add to that, or maybe I can get into the next question?
Thank you, Sharon. I think Stephen has spoken most about it, so I think we can go to the next question.
Sure. There's a question, I think, coming in terms of, you did allude to some of the sectors available for investment in Hong Kong. Maybe you want to get into a little bit more into it, in particular, given kind of the sectors that Sri Lanka are traditionally known for and also emerging as well. What sectors is Invest Hong Kong really hoping to attract into Hong Kong, and even, as you mentioned, the Greater Bay Area in particular for that strategy as well?
Yeah, as I said, we help companies from every conceivable sector that you can think of. And part of our job is, in the early conversations, is to be very honest and give impartial advice to a company as to whether we see a fit for them here in Hong Kong or in the Greater Bay Area. Or if we don't, we'll also give that advice that maybe Hong Kong isn't for you, or you need to think of a different approach. Invariably, there is an angle for almost every company that I've ever come across. Very few of them would we actually say there's no opportunity. Normally, the bigger consideration is whether the company has got the resources, either the capital or the human resources to really develop the marketplace. When you're expanding into an overseas territory, it's obviously expensive in both time and also the financial investment. So that tends to be more of the issue than whether there's a market opportunity. Charlie, I don't know if you want to chip in.
Yes, absolutely correct, Stephen. So traditionally, Sri Lanka has been exporting a lot of products to Hong Kong, especially gems and jewelry, tea and spices, apparels. So I think it's a good opportunity for Sri Lankan companies, especially for companies who are exporting to China, to use Hong Kong as its base and set up their company there for operational convenience and to explore the opportunities. So I think IT as well as is also a key sector in Sri Lanka, and the IT sector can definitely utilize the GPA prospect that China can offer.
Thanks, Charlie. There is a tech startup who is based in Sri Lanka, wanted to know about some of the support schemes that is offered for scaling startup companies. Maybe Stephen or Charlie could raise that up.
Do you want to go first on this one, Charlie, and then I'll chip in?
Well, yes, definitely. I think there is a lot of opportunity for startup companies. In Hong Kong, we have a specialized startup HK team who takes care of startups. There are many events organized by the Start Me Up HK team yearly. So obviously, the Sri Lankan companies can participate in it every year and explore the opportunities. I mean, basically visit Hong Kong and explore the opportunities in Hong Kong.
Yeah, adding to that, we've really got 4 broad priority sectors in the tech space. So AI and robotics, smart cities, biotech, and also fintech. So if the business is in any of one of those 4 areas, those particular areas tend to have more financial support available. The financial support tends to be most significant if there's an R&D element to the business on the ground in Hong Kong. But it really, the funding schemes are really very tailored to the precise nature of the business. So I think, you know, with Blue Chip, we'd be very happy to talk to them, understand exactly what they're doing, and then be able to tell them what's relevant to them. There's no sort of off-the-shelf easy answer for one business. It's very much what's relevant to precisely the nature of the business, and then more precisely what they intend to do in Hong Kong.
Thanks, Stephen. Just to follow up to that from me, is there any incentive in terms of either setup costs or tax incentives for startups for those priority areas, or is it, as you mentioned, you know, the same flat rates that you have for other corporates?
There are certain incentives, so financial incentives, grants. As I said, primarily if there's an R&D element. We've got a very generous R&D tax break as well. So there's a super deduction for R&D expenditure from profits, which is competitive globally. We've got a couple of publicly funded, if you like, either incubation centres or science parks. They all have different programs which companies might be eligible for. That might be giving space, either heavily discounted, possibly even free of charge for a period of time. It can be access to lab space, shared lab space. It can be internships that get subsidized. So again, it really all goes to the exact nature of the business. But that's our job, to talk a company through what's exactly relevant to them.
Right, so a lot of ecosystem support. Just to stick onto the on the topic of taxation, I think there was a question just to understand taxation on non-resident Hong Kong investors, and I think general outlay of the tax profile. I think you did lay out how for $250 and below it's 8.25%, and above that the corporate tax rate is 16.5%. Maybe any more insights other than that? Beyond that, I'm assuming there is no tax rates, as you mentioned. Maybe you want to answer that twofold question.
Yeah, so the Hong Kong tax regime in terms of corporation tax, what we call profits tax, is basically geographically based. So Hong Kong taxes Hong Kong sourced income. So income that is not sourced in Hong Kong, so that could be in an operation elsewhere in the region, generally doesn't get caught by the Hong Kong tax net. And that's one of the attractive reasons for structuring a holding company structure in Hong Kong. But are there further sort of tax attractiveness over the 8.25 and 16.5%? Only in a few specific sectors. So for ship finance, for aircraft finance, in certain parts of the financial services sector, there are some further tax benefits. We've also got a particular tax structure around corporate treasury centres. So if a Sri Lankan company wanted to have an offshore corporate treasury centre doing your hedging, FX, and so forth, that's taxed on the entirety of its profits at half the normal tax rate. But those are the exception rather than the rule.
Got it.
Also, for an individual that is based in Hong Kong, a Hong Kong permanent resident, Hong Kong doesn't tax personal income outside Hong Kong. Now, your home country might tax that income, so typically, obviously, a US citizen, wherever they live in the world, gets caught by US tax potentially. But Hong Kong doesn't extend its sort of arm of taxation outside the boundary.
Thanks. There's a question, I think, on visa, and maybe we can cover it in the overall question in terms of travel right now, and with COVID and then travel restrictions sort of easing out in the foreseeable future. Maybe you want to cover that aspect and obtaining visas and the like.
Charlie, do you want to take that one?
Sure, Stephen. Yes, as you're observing that there is a lot of trade happening between Sri Lanka and Hong Kong, I'm sure the governments in both the countries should take a decision on easifying or easing the visa process. I think as more and more companies, set up their business in Hong Kong from Sri Lanka, I think definitely the government will take some decisions on easing the process. But obviously, once you set up the company in Hong Kong, you are eligible for various business visas, work visa, and all the benefits that you get once you start your company in Hong Kong. So yes, that is something what I can mention. Stephen, would you like to add?
Well, I think you're right. Obviously, at the moment, the practical challenge is around closed borders. Let's hope come the summer later this year that those will be reduced. We are aware that from a Sri Lankan visa applicant's point of view, that it isn't as streamlined as you would like. We'll continue to talk to our colleagues with the immigration department here about trying to make the process easier. But to be honest, my best advice is you need to get your government to take up your case, because they will have more weight in talking to the Hong Kong government than me doing it.
Thanks, Stephen. Let's maybe move to things on unemployment and labor. There's also a question in terms of whether there is firms in Hong Kong who would partner with firms in Sri Lanka in terms of recruitment, or maybe even in general, if we can cover kind of the employment landscape as well with that question.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. Hong Kong's labour market is quite tight in certain areas, particularly in people with AI and data scientist related skill sets. So in certain niche areas, there really could be scope for collaboration on that. And in specified areas, and that would actually include in maritime, which as well might apply to Sri Lanka. The ease of bringing in overseas talent is actually quite straightforward. So we'd be very happy to talk to the company asking that question and understand their positioning and perhaps identify who they might talk to here.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. There was a question on the chat box in terms of tea and whether there's any duty benefits, but I think InvestHK is not the right party to ask this question to.
I believe, sorry to interrupt, I think, we can connect the question to our sister concern, HKTDC, going forward.
Yeah.
If there are any tax-related or duties-related questions, duty-related questions specifically, we can definitely introduce you to our HKTDC, that is Hong Kong Trade and Development Council team, going forward.
Generally speaking, there are no tariffs on entering into Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is, generally speaking, a free port. Specific product type, in case it's one of the exceptions. I don't think it is, though.
So duties, so adding to Stephen's point, so there are duties for 3 products, mainly it's tobacco or petroleum products and high alcohol included, high alcohol included liquor. So these 3 are the products where the duties are imposed. Otherwise, there are no duties. Hong Kong is totally a free port.
But actually picking up the tea point as well, in terms of a consumer product where there's a very high demand for premium product, tea and coffee is one of those areas where you've got sophisticated, relatively wealthy consumers. So a product that is pitched right, of the right quality, can actually have a lot of appeal in this market. Volumes might not be that high, but margins typically are very high.
Great. Thanks, Stephen and Charlie, on those questions. Just a final question. I know we've reached the kind of the end of the webinar, and I don't seem to see any more questions coming in the chat box. So the final question from me, in terms of, I think, the Greater Bay Area, you highlighted some of the other Bay areas which are known for a particular segment or a particular thing. I think this Greater Bay Area, would it be also known as more of a financial sector, or more of a manufacturing hub? And in that process, from a Sri Lankan company point of view or sector point of view, which sectors should be really looking at this Greater Bay Area as an opportunity?
Well, I think it's many sectors again. So a population of 71 million people, the most affluent within China. So it's a good consumer market. Financial services is definitely one angle. Innovation and technology is another very important angle. But you're right also in terms of manufacturing. The advanced manufacturing capacity and capability within GDA is very high, with very sophisticated and efficient supply chains. So for a Sri Lankan company that maybe is looking to have some manufacturing outside Sri Lanka, it could be a part of the world to take a serious look at. But first and foremost, GDA, the core vision is around it becoming a world-class innovation and financial services cluster. But that has tentacles into quite a lot of sectors, inevitably, given that innovation practically drives everything these days.
Thanks. Stephen, Charlie, before we wind up, any final remarks? Anything you want to leave with our audience?
Please have a chat with us. We're always happy to have a no obligations chat and bounce ideas around. We very much enjoy that opportunity, and we just want to try and be helpful to help you make the right decision for your business.
Right. Thank you, Stephen. So from my side, I would say that, it was a great opportunity to interact with all of you. And we are looking forward to interact with you more after this session. I've already shared my contact details. If you would want, you can ask CCC as well. They'll be sharing you our contact details. And we are looking forward to interacting with you more after this session.
Thanks. With that, Charlie and Stephen, thank you so much for spending the last 60 minutes with us, talking about Hong Kong, talking about the opportunities. It was really insightful for me, and I'm sure it was for the participants as well. And I think going by the questions we got on the chat box, there seems to be a lot of companies who are interested. And as you said, investment is a long process, but hopefully today is the starting point for most of these companies. And maybe the next step would be them directly engaging with you, maybe with one-on-one conversations and B2Bs and that part of it. So with that, let me bring this webinar to a close. Thank you to InvestHK and of course my colleagues at the Chamber for putting this webinar together. And look forward to seeing you, Stephen, Charlie, at our investment forum in May as well. Have a good afternoon, good evening in Hong Kong, and the best of the day for those in Sri Lanka as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.